Hello, everyone. This is Manolo Concepcion. I am the new associate head coach at Eastern Illinois University here in the NCAA Division I in the United States of America. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, where I have the opportunity to play and coach, and then also here in the U.S., where I have coached both junior college and now NCAA. When this pandemic began, I wanted to create a platform that will serve as an educational opportunity for people around the world, where we could gather different volleyball communities and listen to their backgrounds and experiences. Here we are a couple of months after, and we continue to bring some great guests. And today's guest is a very, very special one, especially for me, because she has been very instrumental in who I am today as a coach and as a person. I tell her this all the time in private, and I want to tell her now, through Volley Junkies. But I would like to present you Suzie Fritz, the head volleyball coach at Kansas State University. How are you, Suzie?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm honored. I'm looking at the company that you're keeping these days and the volleyball people you're talking to, and I'm just, as I said, I'm very proud of you and honored to be on.
Have you been able to watch any of the live so far, Suzie?
I have. I haven't been able to watch them all. A lot of times I go back and watch them after you do them. I'm not on live, but I go back. It's kind of my 11 p.m. to midnight, but some amazing stuff and really impressive conversations. And I saw bits and pieces of the conversation you had with Pilar and a lot of really important and fun volleyball topics and a lot of things that don't have anything to do with volleyball. So it's amazing stuff. And I'm just really, really impressed. And what a great way to spend your time.
Thank you so much for being here, Suzie. And again, before we talk about your background and experiences, I want to mention once again that Suzie Fritz was the person that helped me get my first opportunity as a coach in the United States. So I have been very grateful to her since, for a long time now. Very honored that she thought of me a long time ago for such a great door, basically. I want to mention that Suzie has been part of Kansas State University for 19 years now. Does it seem that long, Suzie? What do you think?
Yeah, some days. Yeah, some days it seems that long. It's some days just like yesterday, right? I mean, I was really fortunate. I've worked for some great coaches and been around a lot of tremendous volleyball people. I was working at Barton County Community College for Ray Bouchard, who is now the volleyball coach at the University of Kansas. I also had played for him for 2 years and had an amazing junior college experience. And Coach Bouchard probably had a lot to do with me getting into coaching volleyball. I come from a coaching family to begin with. My brothers, my dad, they're all football coaches. And then I came to work for a guy by the name of Jim McLaughlin, who is an amazing volleyball person and, worked for Jim as an assistant starting in 97 for 4 years. And I like to say I kind of talked myself into a job. I became the head coach when Jim left to take the job at the head coaching job at the University of Washington. They named me the interim, I think, because it was a week before the season and they couldn't find anybody better, So I talked my way into a job and then we did well enough to keep it, right? So a lot of, like anything else in coaching, some of what you fall into has a lot to do with luck and opportunity and capitalizing on the opportunities that are presented to you. So for me, it's been a dream job to be at Kansas State for this long. And I love it here. I work for an amazing institution. And so some days it does seem like 19 years, give or take. But other times it just seems like yesterday. I suppose it depends on the day.
What are some of the things that you feel that you acquire from Jim McLaughlin, when you were his assistant that you're still applying today?
Yeah, so I think so many things. I mean, it would be hard, honestly, to probably go down the list. At the time I was 26 years old. I think there's a point in your coaching career when you think you know an awful lot, and then years later you figure out that you didn't know so much. And so Jim was able, probably the primary, I think, thing that really changed the course of my coaching career was just the introduction to motor learning, and the philosophies that go along with that, and through Jim I was able to really practice those motor learning principles on a daily basis, and he had to change my mind on a lot of things. Oftentimes when you get into coaching, you know what you coach the way you played, you prescribe to the things that the best, even though those might not be the best methods and principles and ways of doing things. And so that's what I was doing. I was 26 years old and I was doing and saying way too much. And so I think Jim allowed me an opportunity to be an assistant, watch how he worked. He's an unbelievable teacher and an unbelievable volleyball mind to begin with, but really just the principles of motor learning and how you apply them to volleyball and how you apply them to coaching, and being able to observe those things and practice those things, I think for me were really big, in combination with just the people that Jim was introduced me to, people that became and continue to be my friends. Carl McLaughlin being one, who was a dear friend who would call and yell at me, and I could send him video and he'd ask me what in the hell I was doing, and but really challenged me to think differently and do differently. And Mark Dempsey, who continues to be a mentor for me and somebody that I can really call. And head coaching sometimes is lonely, Manolo, it's lonely sometimes. So having those people that you can reach out to and work through difficult issues is really important. So I think those are the two things, introducing me to motor learning, changing the philosophy and the things I believed in as a coach, as a young coach. I was really, really fortunate. And then just the people that I was able to get exposed to through his relationships have both been pretty beneficial for me professionally.
Why, for the people who are watching around the world and will later watch this on YouTube, why are motor learning principles so important to be implemented in the game that we love, Susie?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, right? And I don't profess to be a motor learning expert, right? It is by no means, it's not my field of study, and I'm not a professional, but I do firmly believe that it's important, maybe from the perspective of it's just the fastest way to learn, that there are a lot of ways that we can go about it. There's a lot of things we can say. There's a lot of things we can do, but we only have a finite amount of time during the course of the day to be able to impact our athletes. And so what we do with that time is really, really important. And if you're only going to see them 2 hours a day, and maybe you're lucky to practice 5 days a week, and maybe, now you add that time up and you've got 10 hours to try to make a dent. So for me, it's about, there's a lot of ways to do it. And if you do something long enough, you'll probably get better at it. But I personally, subscribe to the idea that teaching using motor learning principles allows us to learn faster. It doesn't allow us to teach faster. It allows us to learn faster. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, and I'm not sure I'm going on, but
please do.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, sometimes as a coach is getting your players to understand and to prescribe to these principles as well. This is a challenge, because we get them from all over the country, all over the world, from a lot of different training environments, and then try to say, okay, This is good. This is maybe something we want to tweak a little bit. You know, we don't bring them if we don't think they're good, right? We bring them because we think they're good, but there's still some things we'd like them to approach a little bit differently. And getting your team to buy into, I think, whole versus part activities, random versus blocked activities, and some of the, I guess, key components of coaching with a motor learning philosophy.
Do you actually explain this to the players, Susie? Are there players that are asking, "Hey, Susie, why are you wanting me to do all these things?" Do you actually sit with them and explain the science part of the game?
You know, it's funny that you asked this question, because I think the answer is I have not done a very good job of doing that. And I think more recently, it's been a learning experience for me. I'm still trying to learn and grow as a coach. And I don't think over the past couple of seasons, I've done a very good job as a coach of explaining the why. Here's why we warm up as we do. Here's why we train as we do. Here's why we do the drills that we do. And we coach a pretty highly intelligent, high execution based kind of personnel, and they require the whys maybe more than ever, right? So I've honestly used some of this quarantine time at one of our priorities just as a staff. Is some of our meetings have been devoted to just the principles of learning, and maybe, I don't want to say undoing what they know, but in some ways at least getting them to understand why we go about our business the way we go about it. And I think it has been helpful. You know, trust is such an important aspect, and them trusting that the things that we're doing are going to make them better. It matters a lot. And I think I've done a really poor job of that over the last couple of seasons. But I'm gaining some ground. I think I'm getting a little better at it.
We're talking to Susie Fritz, one of my personal favorite coaches in the world, just because of what you just heard. You know, she's really burnable, someone that is not willing to say when she makes mistakes. You know, and I think those are really big signs of a great learner. Can you tell me what are some of the ways that in Kansas State volleyball you use to create that vulnerability within your players? That it's okay, it's a safe environment in this gym to make mistakes for you to get better.
Yeah, I again, you know, I think we're kind of a work in progress, right? I think I have one answer, you know, one quick answer, which is to encourage risk. You know, to celebrate risk. That I think that there is a predisposition at times to.
I love that concept.
Yeah.
Simple. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just to encourage risk. You know that. That failure's good. That we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, I'm kind of like I feel like I say the same stuff over and over. You know, if they miss a ball by this much and they look at me and go like this, and I go like this back, like, hey, that was pretty good. You know, that's good risk. So I think celebrating risk, good risk, and there is a difference. You know, well-managed risk is much different than reckless. And I think trying to teach them to understand the difference, you know, that it's, for example, right, using attacking as an example, hitting it as hard as you can is okay sometimes. But if that's the only tool you've got in the bag, right, then you're not going to be a very good attacker. So you've got to learn to be able to go get this and go get that and mix in this. And that's a hard thing to teach, because sometimes that takes some courage to be able to try something new and uncomfortable and different. And the only thing I know to do is just to encourage risk and to celebrate it when it happens.
Susie, you have coached 16 All-Americans, 24 All-Region players, and 49 All-Conference players.
That's mostly because I've been alive for a longer time.
Changing the mindset, or helping with the mindset of a really talented player at this level who is already 18 years old, who has already learned specific principles, how do you, how do you go into that battle of on unlearning something, helping a player unlearn something to then go through the actual skill acquisition process with you?
Boy, you are really asking some doozies. I mean, this is like, that's a complicated process, right? You know, I'm going to be honest, they're not all ready to go through that process. That process that you're talking about, to me, takes maybe their entire career, sometimes.
Maybe by senior year, you get that happening.
Maybe, maybe, this idea of really full buy-in, you know what I mean? Full buy-in to the ways that, they're learning. And what I'll tell you is players are far more apt to do that for two reasons, right? If they feel like they're improving, they'll keep going.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
that's a key component of it, that if I feel like this technique or this way or this philosophy is making me better, I'll keep going. And then if they're having success, and really, I mean, if you've ever been through a season where no matter what you did, right, your team just wasn't quite ready to have success, that buy-in is really, really hard to get.
I've been there. Yes.
Yeah, it's easy, right? You can tell them anything when you're winning, right? Yeah. I mean, spin around 3 times and then go serve it over the net. But
go buy into it easily. Yeah.
Yeah, and they might do it because they're having success. It's easier, right? But where I think it gets really complicated is on those years where it's not coming easy, your team's not winning, and you're still trying to stay with it. Right. Trust us, trust yourself, that, we're in it for the long haul. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? You're trying to go through all the coachisms that, just to get them to be a more patient learner.
Yeah.
And they're just not very patient.
Does that have to do with, because after 19 years, I think that a big tendency have been towards instant gratification of the newer generations. Right. Is that something that is attached towards the lack of patience towards learning?
Yeah, and just the idea that it takes time to get good at really good mastery, right? I mean, mastery takes years. You probably won't even completely figure it out. I can't tell you how many players I've had come back and maybe go play after college in any fashion and come back and go, I wish I would have, right? Oh, I wish
yes.
And all the things that they know when they're done, and the things that, because they're simply a better learner, they're a more mature person, they don't get caught up and expend energy on the things that don't matter very much, And so I think, yeah, I mean, I like this generation. I think there's so many positive things to them, but they want things pretty quickly. And the, reality is that these are not skills that you can develop quickly. And it takes a lot of time to develop mastery in our sport and in a lot of other skills. And
when recruiting
so I don't have an answer.
Susie, when recruiting now compared to before, are you highly considering those aspects of, is she a good learner right now or no? Or,
I can tell you that we're asking that question a lot.
Oh,
a lot more than we ever did in the past, and asking their people, how does she take in information? How adaptable is she? Is she good when it's good, but not so good when it's bad, and I think the ability to kind of take in information, and I'm not talking about just like a coach telling you what to do, but the ability to, play volleyball and then be going as you're going, right? Getting better as you go because of what you're learning about what's happening to you. What your body's doing, what your opponent is doing, how the game is evolving, and being able to not over process that information, but take that information and get better as you go. And it's such an elite skill. And And I think we get sometimes so programmed into do this, say this, go like this, that we lose the flexibility to just be really intuitive, instinctive. And our game is just so instinctive. It requires so much intuition and instinctiveness that these are things you can't coach them. You can talk about
like does intrinsic motivation matters to you when you see a player? Like, do you see, hey, she needs too much cheering for her to actually get her game going, or she's self-motivated and she's self-driven? Are those aspects that you're considering as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just don't know. I get frustrated sometimes in the recruiting process because I feel sometimes that the things that you're describing, right? What kind of a learner they are, what their level of motivation is, they're very difficult to assess in the recruiting process. The recruiting process is such a surface level process that the things that really matter, it's very hard to dig into those things. I think that goes both ways too. Even as an athlete, I'm not sure that the athletes that are being recruited are able to kind of dig deep enough to know what it's really like to be in the trenches with these people. They don't know it until it's too late, right?
Is this why we have this like crazy free agency in the portal now?
Well, it can't help, right? I mean, it can't help because this is not an easy process. This is a difficult process. You better like the people you're going to war with, right? Because you're going to bleed and sweat together and all those kind of things. You're going to go through some tough things. And so I don't know about the motivation part, but what I can tell you we see it later on, right? We don't usually know what's inside of them until they get here. And I oftentimes say the difference between good and great is how hot it burns and how fast you learn. And it has nothing to do with your...
You just blew my mind with that quote. You just blew my mind with that quote. Love it.
I think it's the difference between good or even really good and great is, what do you got here and what do you have here? And and it's so hard to know, it takes some time and some maturity. So it's very difficult to assess in the recruiting process, and yet probably the single most important quality in whether they figure it out.
Yeah, for the people that are starting, or thinking about two things, because coaching in the NCAA, you have a player as a goal for 4 years, just like an Olympic cycle for international people watching us right now. Like, what are some things that if I'm starting to start recruiting, like if I'm beginning that process, like what are things that I should be paying attention to? Like maybe skill wise, without position consideration, and then what are some intangibles that we should be paying attention, Susie?
I think you talked a lot about it, right? I mean, and I'll just be a little bit vulnerable here. The hard thing is we see a lot of players that have the physical capabilities and the physical characteristics to be successful. They're big, they're strong, they're athletic, they move well, they hit hard, they jump high. Those are the easy things. Those are the easy things, I think, as a recruiter, right? Everybody sees that. That doesn't take a lot. But the player that can make people around them better, that person in my mind, and again, I'm just sharing a personal philosophy, is I think that person is going to jump another. If physical characteristics are close, then I will always take the person who can make people around them better. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I think you see some people do it with their energy and with their words. I think you see other players doing it by making 100 little plays that don't necessarily stand out, but they allow you to play good volleyball, and glue, if you will, right? Always having a little bit of glue that kind of is holding all of the big pieces together, I think is important. Intangible characteristics, being able to recruit character, and
so hard, Susie. That's so hard because it takes time,
it's hard to know. it's hard to know. And you find probably too often people telling you what you want to hear. And I don't think they're all this way, but sometimes both the athletes
They're all
and the
perfect.
parents and the clubs and they have some pressure to acquire what they're trying to get out of it. So I understand, I'm not judging them for this, but their priorities are not always the same. And so I think, maybe that's a short list. I think, little things matter. The ability to make people around you better. If you get high quality people, it'll generally lead to high quality teams.
Yes.
And, I think that, and not sacrificing there, which I don't want to, I think as a young coach,
I have done that, Susie. I have made
so many times.
mistakes.
Yeah. And we all do. We all do, because the pressure of success and winning in our business and keeping our jobs, and 4 kills a game matters. Let's be honest, 4 kills a game matters. And Mary Wise told me one time, Mary Wise, and I'm sorry, I might misquote her, but has this philosophy of parallel lines, productivity and maintenance. And as long as those lines are parallel, right, those are players that are manageable. That's not a great word, right? But when the lines start to cross, right, when your maintenance line and your productivity line start to cross, now you have problems. And I think there's some truth to that,
I agree. And I think that a person that could destroy a team, sometimes that energy is more contagious than the person that could help you build. And he actually takes less time destroying than the actual building itself. How about so if I'm going to your gym, I'm a player, I'm gonna be my first year, my first practice, what should I expect from you? What are your coaching principles that are not negotiable for you?
Well, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it. We've shifted a little bit with some of the stuff that we're doing with our team. We're trying to incorporate a little bit more mental toughness work, a little bit more mindfulness work into our practice planning than we ever had.
Look like? How does it look like?
Yeah. So there's a group. I want to say this right, but it's called the Braver Method, BRAVR. And so in the spring, we kind of went through this process of determining what our personal goals were, turning those goals into affirmations, which are more like passer, I'm capable of strong leadership qualities, I can, I will type of things you want to commit to on a daily basis. And then upon arrival in our gym right now, we have you go through that Braver sequence. It's a breathing sequence, relaxation sequence. You go through the affirmation. You kind of release anything that there's a release kind of in there that's like, I'm willing to let go of everything else that might be keeping me from being fully present in this moment right now.
I love it. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. So that was a spring experiment, and I told the girls, if you hate it, we won't do it. If you hate it, I don't know if I have a lot of non-negotiables, like I think sometimes you have to try things, see how your team responds to them. And you have to know what not to do anymore sometimes,
What are those things for you?
Say that again.
What are those things for you, Susie? What are things that you did before that you can share that you feel like they're not relevant anymore?
Oh man, I mean, I have so many. One is overcoaching. Like I was probably for the first 5 to 7 years, of my coaching career, I just want to apologize to any former player that might have played for me between
me too
1995 and 2000. Just the overcoaching. I think for me that's probably one of the big ones. where, you know, you're trying so hard to help a player. It's all well intended, but you're giving them so much information that by the time your 2-minute speech is over, they have no idea what you want them to do, right?
They're thinking about something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot better at doing less. You know, I've gotten a lot better at saying less. I've gotten a lot better at prioritizing what are the most important things during the course of a day or the course of a practice. I've gotten a lot better at managing people. You know, I think early on I was probably afraid of direct conflict early on, and very difficult conversations that I think are necessary to get an athletic trainer and a strength and conditioning guy and assistant coaches and managers and ops and administrators even on the same page. You've got to make sure you know exactly what you want to try to get a dozen people dancing in the same direction, right? So
you feel like the more participative that you have been, the more results you have found, and then, you know, the simpler you have got, and then your message have come across clearer and better?
Yes, simple, direct feedback, you know, I think is probably the single biggest thing that I just wasn't very good at for a long time. You know, I was good at the feedback part, not the simple, direct part.
Oh,
right. So
okay.
yeah. So and so I
in
think
regards of that, like, how do you change? Do you actually change your feedback when you're talking to an administrator than when you're talking to a young athlete? Like, are your methods different in that way?
no, I just think the idea of being able to condense the most important things need to be the things that are coming out of your mouth, you know, and not. So no, I mean, the answer is no. Getting better at having the most important things coming out of your mouth and doing that over and over and over and over again. And there's times I feel like, man, I am saying the same shit over and over again, but I think that's it. You know, that's kind of part of the gig, right? If it's the most important thing, saying it one time isn't going to make a difference.
Do you have a routine about that, Susie? Like every Monday, well, before this happened, like every Monday you do this specific things, operational wise and planning wise, and then Tuesday the same, Wednesday. Like, do you have something like that, or what kind of structure do you have?
Yeah, I think from a day, like if you looked at just our day-to-day, if you're talking about just our athletes, right, and our day-to-day practice planning, our practice structure from day to day doesn't change. It's the same. They know what to expect from the minute they walk in the building to what they're supposed to do in the training room to what they do when they walk into the gym. You know, as you might imagine, just with a GMS background, you know, we've got the whiteboard and the goals and, you know, the activities and everything is here for us to know, so we know what's coming. You know, it's all about the you know, there's always many things that are happening during the course of a practice. Like my focus on a particular day, right? I think during the course of a practice, what's important is where your feedback is being given is what's going to get better that day. And so wherever you're trying to direct your goals and objectives, that's what you should be talking about. That's where you should be standing. That's where you should be directing their eyes, your eyes, right? And trying to get everything, I guess, maybe streamlined, if you will. But I might be doing that, and my two assistants might be doing something completely different. And that's still something I'm getting better at, because I feel like I go into practice with pretty clear and concise objectives and goals, but sometimes I don't do a good enough job of organizing my people to make sure that maybe their feedback is as clear and concise as it possibly can be. And so what that'll do sometimes is you'll find two coaches coaching the same thing. And I don't think that that's necessarily the most effective way of being able to get them to learn fast, right?
Okay, so let's say that you are emphasizing on, you know, offensive timing, and you're working on the second step of your attackers. are your assistants working on something else like defense in that per se? Like what are the other objectives that you're talking about?
Yeah, it depends on the person, right? So generally speaking, what I'm talking about becomes the most important thing because
Okay.
I'm the head coach.
Yes.
Right. But there's all these little rocks in, big rocks, little rocks, right? So there's all these little rocks that are happening simultaneously. So usually I have to make sure I'm not talking about 50 little rocks. I gotta stay with the big rock, the most important thing. But we can't avoid that there's also a dozen, 20, 100 other things on the list of things to do that we have to make incremental improvement on. And to me, that's where, in my case, Jeff and Trent become so valuable because they are attacking the 25 little rocks, So if you're working on second step, and that's my priority in that moment, what are the other things that are surrounding it that are going to lead up to it? Whether that means one of them is coaching offense or the other's on defense, or one's coaching passing while the other is coaching blocking, whatever that might be happening in that moment. But coordinating, not just from practice to practice, but drill to drill, what your coaching assignments are and where their eyes should be. I think that's a developing skill as well in terms of coordinating your staff. And it takes some time. We don't meet daily on practice planning. I know a lot of people do. We have general coaching assignments, position assignments. And so for the most part, when we go into practice, we have an idea of where we want to be, which side of the ball we want to be on. But I think I can be better at narrowing that focus. And that's kind of a priority and a goal for me, I think, going forward, is to be better at prioritizing where all of us should be.
You have been with the same as first assistant coach for a long time. Is this something that, how do you make sure that you create a balance within those responsibilities? And how do you make sure that you keep challenging, someone like that, an assistant coach that have been with you forever, basically?
Yeah, it's a great question. That I think there's good and bad with being together for a long time, right? I mean, the good is that you think a lot alike.
Yeah.
That you've been coaching together for so long that Jeff in particular can finish my sentences, and so the philosophical alignment feels good a majority of the time because even if there's things he disagrees with, he's disagreed with them for 12 years, so it's not going to be a surprise. But we try to be not stuck. We try to be open to learning and continuing to challenge each other. Jeff, in all honesty, is probably one of the best volleyball researchers out there. I mean, he's the guy that just is watching film incessantly, sending clips to the players, and he's a volleyball junkie. He cannot get enough, that guy. So, Jeff is the greatest at just continuing to try to learn and grow as an individual. So there's a lot of things. He's always bringing new ideas and new things and new thoughts, I think, to the table. And I think that's a big part of it, is because I have two great learners on my staff. And that helps us, I think, continue to not be stagnant and try to have these core principles and philosophies that we believe in, but yet some fluidity and some flexibility to not get stuck in them, and adapt based on the personnel that we have or how volleyball is evolving and trending, and try to stay current with those things as best as we can and not lose sight of who we are and what we think is most important.
Building a culture. What are 3 keys that we can learn from you, that you feel that are pretty consistent into the better teams that you have had throughout your years?
Better people make better players, So I think not ignoring developing people matters a lot. That we can't just be invested in what kind of players they are. We have to be invested in what kind of people they are. And right now, that's a complicated thing, right? We're trying to keep them safe, and we're trying to address racial inequality, and we try to talk openly about things that are being presented to us in front of us all the time, and giving them a safe place to have difficult conversations. So maybe that's one. Better people make better players.
Mm-hmm.
I think getting them, we have 5 core values that we try to prescribe to, things like confidence and competitiveness. They all start with a C so that I can remember them. And so, we try to have 5 core values that we think are important. It's a way of us saying, be a person of character.
Mm-hmm.
Be a person that can embrace competitive. Don't be afraid of competitiveness. It's a good thing. Be a committed person,
Mm-hmm.
and I think establishing some level of core values, in terms of the things that are the most important thing. If you're a Wildcat, you are these things, and if you're not, then you shouldn't be a Wildcat. And, so I guess at the basis of things, maybe those are my 2 biggies, is what are your non-negotiables, and for us, that's our.
Susie, are you there? We're talking to Susie Fritz, who is the head volleyball coach at Kansas State University. She's been kind enough to share some of her culture and some of her strategies that she uses in her own program. Please continue, Susie. We lost you for a little bit there. Can you hear me? We're trying to try to see how we can make this happen. Susie, can you hear me there?
I can now.
Okay.
Sorry, did I lose you?
Yes. That's fine. Now, please continue. So you were mentioning how there were some things that within being a Wildcat, that some of the people that come to your program can do it, some of them not, and they should not then be there, and then they move on. So please continue from that point. You there? Again, I appreciate everyone that is tuning in. We have been talking to Susie Fritz. Like I have said multiple times, she's one of my favorite coaches in the world, just because of how good of a learner she has been all her life. I know her since 2005, around 2005, and maybe a little bit before that. And I have seen the same person with the same kind heart from beginning until now. So very, very grateful and honored to be her friend. And here we are. Susie, are you there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's me or you, but I'll take responsibility.
Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
Culture's the buzzword, right? Culture is the sports buzzword, right? Everybody's looking for some magical dust that you're supposed to sprinkle on your team, and then all of a sudden everybody's going to get along, So I have some mixed feelings about culture, every team, every year is different. The culture of the team, even if a majority of the players are the same, that when 2 people leave and they take their set of skills and talents with them, and 2 new people come in, it has now changed the culture, and sometimes dramatically, depending on who left and who came in, and what their values are, and the set of beliefs that they have when they walk in the door. It's very difficult, I think, to just have this like prescription method to developing culture. That I think you have to look at your team, the dynamics, the things that are important to them, the things they do well. Try to lean into those things, the things that they do well. And then try to figure out where their gaps might be, and then develop approaches for how you're going to address those gaps. And they all have them, they all have them. But to me, I just don't know if there's this prescription method to developing culture. And I've read all the books, and I listen to all the podcasts, and I think there's a million great ideas out there, right? But I just think you're talking about the business of people, and you're talking about dealing with people, and people are incredibly unpredictable. So you've got to have I think a relatively flexible approach to developing culture.
How are you approaching this concept of diversity and inclusion? It's become very, very important right now, especially, of course, this issue that we're having in the present time has been going on for more than 200 years. But within your locker room, um, again, we're talking to Susie Fritz. We kind of lost signal there, but we're going to address or trying to address the issue of diversity and inclusion and how us as coaches in the NCAA or in any program that you're out there, you can approach this matter with your own players. So I'm curious to learn about how Susie Fritz approaches this in her locker room with her players, and how do you make this a priority in your program?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Tell me again. What am I prioritizing?
So basically, talking about diversity and inclusion, and
Yeah.
how are you addressing this issue, and with such importance that it has right now and it has had for a long time. How does it look like in your locker room, and you as a leader of your program? How do you make it a priority?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, right? We are predominantly, I coach at a predominantly white institution. Historically, I've coached a predominantly white team. And it isn't probably until the last maybe 5 or 6 years, and we've tried to make it a priority to add more diversity, to actively recruit the Black student athlete. And now we've had players from all over the world, different language, different cultures, all over the world, and have had many international players. But now at this point, I've got probably a quarter of my team are people of color, and I think it's amazing. I love the dynamic that it adds to our team. I love the Black, the women on my team are amazing in general, but the Black women on my team and the things that they encounter are different. The way they live in the world is different. And, it's sad right now how everything happening in the world, they are affected by it. So if you're not paying attention to it, you better wake up, because they're sad and they're angry, and they need us to advocate. I think for them, they need us to listen. They need us to educate ourselves. So we're just trying to open up the conversation. I think right now we had a pretty lengthy and I would say heavy discussion on the topic in our Wednesday team meeting last week. And we gave them an assignment to kind of break out into their big little, we have these big little groups that oftentimes is an upperclassman and an underclassman. And their assignment for the week was to get together and discuss action items. What can we as a team, how can we improve our own team dynamics? How can we influence racial injustice on our campus? How can we influence racial injustice in our community? And what are some action items, right? Instead of posting some random Black Lives Matter on social media, how can we actually be women of influence? And so I think that's right now where the discussion is at, is we're kind of to the, we're in this educational phase right now. What does it mean to be a white person right now? What does it mean to be a Black person right now? What are the differences? How can we help each other? And then take that a step further with what are the things we're willing to commit to as a group, collectively. There's power in numbers, as you're seeing, right now. And so I don't know, that's right now, right? Moving from the education phase into the action phase is kind of where we're at right now. And I'm hoping that it's not just like this short-term like buzz, that it's something that can be a lifelong endeavor. That if we have some influence over, even if it's just 16 women, what they can go and take out into the world will be very meaningful, and the influence that they can have over the people that they come into contact with, right? So I don't know. That's right now trying to move from education to advocacy, or action, however you want to look at it, and what that looks like, and actually asking the women on the team to be part of that process. What does action look like for us? And what can we agree upon? You know, so that's where we're at.
How about you, like as a coach who is a woman? You know, maybe as except from the NCAA in the U.S., around the world, the main gender in volleyball, in both men's and women's volleyball, it's men as coaches.
Right.
What are some things that, I mean, that maybe society is doing to not create better opportunities, or what are some things that we can improve that you have seen around you for you to be in one place for such a long time? Like, what are some of the key elements that we can improve in order to facilitate this?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, you know, and I'm not sure that I have probably the best answer. What I know is that, like anything else, it's important to have great mentorship as a young coach. That just playing volleyball in college isn't qualification enough to go be good at getting into the business of coaching. And oftentimes what we do to young female coaches is we take them from a playing role,
Yes,
and we try to throw them into a coaching role. And we say, okay, well, you played volleyball, you know, so you know what you're doing. And we don't get the opportunity, I think, sometimes to maybe develop. And whether that's from, excuse me, learning from and here's, I guess, my rub, right? If we had a GA position that was available to us, that would be a great role for young female coaches to, for a couple of years, get your master's degree, be in a good program, learn from people that are actually doing it, almost like an internship, you know. It'd be great for minority coaches. It would be great for female coaches. But the NCAA rules don't allow us to do that. You're either full-time or you're not. And I think it's a disadvantage for our ability to mentor, I guess, younger female coaches coming in, you know. And I have 2 males on my staff, you know, and I want to continue to mentor young female coaches, but I think what keeps them from doing it oftentimes are the concerns over being able to have quality of life, which I think should be a concern for all coaches in terms of how you're going to find that life-work balance. But for women and their roles oftentimes in their families, you know, the traditional family roles of raising children, it is more difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult for men. I'm just saying it's difficult for women in our role in child rearing, especially when they're little. And, you know, I think that keeps a lot of women coaches from feeling like there's just not enough of me to go around, you know. And I can tell you, I still at times struggle with that as a female, that you feel like you're not good anywhere. You're not good enough anywhere. You're not a good enough wife. You're not a good enough parent. You're not a good enough coach. There's just not enough hours in the day to put enough of yourself into what you're trying to do. And so being able to teach, I think, a lot of coaches, but particularly young females, how to do that, how to try to find that life-work balance, and maybe the right situation that you need to be in to be successful. Because I don't think all situations are going to allow you the equal opportunity for success.
Right.
So I don't know if that's like a great answer. It's a little bit of a rambling one.
No, definitely.
One, you can do it. You can do it. It is possible. You
love
can do it.
I love it. Before going back to the volleyball aspect of things, I wanna ask you about something specific to you really quick. You have a husband who is being inducted in the Hall of Fame. I just want you to give him a shout out and then tell me why is he being inducted in the Hall of Fame. He's a kind of like a big deal.
You'll be so thrilled that we're talking about him. Can I tell you? He's, he had an amazing career, in all honesty. I mean, to him, he's a very humble man to begin with. And it's been many years ago that it's almost like he's living his third life, but back in that life, right? I think he's a kind of a laser focused guy, that when he sets his sights on something, you just need to get out of the way, and I was fortunate to come in, I think, on the end of his career, because I'm not sure there would have been time for me kind of in the middle of that. But he, yeah, I mean, and it's an amazing and well-deserved honor for him. It's the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. And
wow,
he's, he was a tremendous, the decathlon is a really, when you talk about motor learning, the decathlon is kind of the, you have to be really good at a lot of things, right? And so to be able to acquire that many skills, that that many talents, at that level, I think is a really special thing. So we're really proud of him.
Well, congratulations to Mr. Fritz and Coach Fritz, actually, and wish him the best, of course, moving forward. Susie, I wanna go to a little bit of watching film now, and this is 2016, and I want
to get up here closer.
I want you to tell me. I don't know if you can see it clearly. I know that you're talking to us from a phone right now. I appreciate that anyway. This is an amazing team that you had. One of your great years. And you are here playing Baylor. And I wonder, tell me, what special things program like this year had?
Oh my gosh. You're asking me to go back. I they all blend together after a while. You know what I mean, Manuel? So, okay. What was really interesting about this team is, one, we had a tremendous setter. Her name was an All-American setter by the name of Katie Brand. And when you talk about just level of competitiveness, she was kind of at the top of the pyramid in regards to, she wasn't a tremendously vocal person, but the leadership on this particular team, it was senior heavy. They were an incredibly disciplined group of focused people. Volleyball mattered a lot, and they were willing to make the necessary sacrifices. So the commitment level in this particular group was really high. I will tell you, from a personality perspective, when I think back about this group, I mean, far ends of the spectrum in terms of just personality. So if I go back to the culture question, right? If you put this group of people in a room together, you would not anticipate that they would have a lot in common in some ways, right? But they really played together nicely because they kind of each accepted their what their role was on that particular team. That team, I will say, we also had added a couple of really meaningful transfers. Katie Reiniger was an M1 that could really hit a slide for us, and Brooke Sasson came in as kind of an O2 for us, and they both turned out to exceed our expectations and fill some holes for us. And a really amazing just group of people, a really committed group of people. And boy, it's kind of fun to go back and watch. So thanks for that.
I'm actually want to ask you, very straight and simple, service formation. Of course, we both come from GMS background, but I want you, for the people watching out there, why you believe so strongly on that straight and simple, type of almost standing form before the serve comes, for service.
Hey, did you just see that setter entry in row 2 coming from left back? Did you see that craziness?
I saw that.
Yeah, that was really something. we
Look at
had, yeah, it was in rotation 2, right? Normally, row 2 or row 3, we had some really unusual serve receive patterns that year, and we had our setter coming from serve receive clear over there in row, it was row 2 or row 3. I think we had her backed clear up because we just from a passing perspective, we wanted our opposite, Brenna Vogel, to be able to pass right there. But going back to your question, sorry, you got me distracted.
no, I'm okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think in serve receive that you want to be in a position you can move out of. I guess that's the easy answer, is that what we see, right? Our ability to kind of see and track both with our eyes and with our platform, in our opinion, take precedent over anything else. So I like a good, comfortable position that I can do those things in. I want to be in a position where I can see what the server wants to do, and I'm able to track the ball with my eyes and my platform and my feet. I don't think that we don't move our feet. I just think that it's what we see and how we track with our eyes and our platform are more important than anything.
I love that it's always arms first, very, very, very simple, quiet contact, not much into that angle, letting that angle do the work, most of it. And that's the most impressive thing that I see from your film. And I have seen, from your years there at Kansas State, that something that has been consistent with you is the simplicity of movements of your players.
There's a lot of ways to teach it, right? I mean, but I do believe that it's a skill where there's so much movement on the ball that the less you do, the better you can be. The more, this is not a skill where the more complex movements generally lead to more success. And there's something now, when you talk about unlearning, now there's something that we have to spend a lot of time unlearning in this particular skill when players come, is I don't know how many times I say, do less, which is not real specific feedback, but basically it's code for you've got way too much going on right now, So I think it's an important quality in being good at passing, is to just be able to have great eyes and great platform skills.
Do you find it correlational when players come from clubs that are mainly in block training, then random, more difficult for them to unlearn, to learn something?
Yes. Yeah, the longer they've been doing something in a particular way, right? It's much easier to teach, to learn than unlearn, which I think you said earlier. It's much easier to learn than unlearn. Almost to the point where we've had 2 kids in the recent, maybe 3 in the last maybe 5-6 years that we have converted to liberos that had almost equal success to ones that had been liberos for 10 to 15 years, because they were just learning how to pass. And so long as they were good learners, their ability to learn was a lot easier than someone's ability to unlearn. So again, a recruiting piece, you better like the way they do it before they get to you, because it's hard to teach them how to do it differently.
How about reading? How do you introduce this? It could be such a great subjective concept to explain and provide feedback, like specific feedback to the player. How do you introduce this from the defensive aspect?
Gosh, you're full of so many good questions, Manuel. I'm so I love it. Okay, so again, going back to probably errors that you make as a young coach, one of the errors I think most coaches make is they focus all of their feedback on technique, when technique is probably 50% of the equation in almost everything we do. Because our tracking skills in nearly every skill, the only exception is maybe serving, because it's the one kind of independent block skill that we do. But what we see and our ability to keep our eyes ahead of the ball, to watch what's about ready to happen, not things as they happen, is it's it, it's what starts to separate players. And you hear athletes in every sport, football, basketball, hockey, any sport where the ball moves quickly, right? Talk about this breakthrough moment in their careers when the game slowed down for them. And the game doesn't slow down because they get faster. The game slows down because their processing speed gets better. And so when you're talking about that I sequence, that's what we're talking about. Your ability to process complex information in a very, very, very short amount of time. So I think what we can do for them as coaches is to try to split our feedback into, instead of 80% technique and 20%, eye work and focus, we need to probably get that closer to 50-50. And we need to be talking a lot more about what they're seeing and the speed at which they're seeing it, and less about what they're doing. And because in all honesty, think about it. If you get a player with bad technique and great eyes, that player is going to be a better player than a player with great technique and bad eyes, So I think finding some kind of balance in our training, that we're talking more about what they're seeing and being a little bit more specific about that sequence.
Is that where you use guided discovery more than anything? Because it increases the learning rate in such a difficult skill?
People get upset when I talk about, I think the ball setter, ball hitter sequence is too complicated. I think I'm thinking ball setter, ball hitter. I think it has to be a more intuitive, right now, just focus on what the setter wants to do, and see if you can just get them really good at going from ball to setter. Just know where it's going, and that'll be half our battle, right? And so as of late, we've been starting to go a little bit more like, you have to check it, right? Check it and then look, and then check it and then look. But it is a check, because you can't spend a lot of time chasing the ball or staring at the ball, right? But you got to know what it's doing at the same time, and using that. I think Hugh talks a little bit about kind of having your focus be broad to narrow to broad to narrow. And that's a little bit of that kind of check, look sequence. Same thing, different words, But if you can get them good at getting picking up the cues as to what happens with the ball early, you'll be able to start picking up the clues as to what's going to happen next, because it's all about the clues. What are the clues that tell you what's going to happen next? That's where the secret is, is how quickly can you pick up the clues. And so get a long look on the setter, check the ball, try to get them, and then move to the hitter where you're.
Again, we're talking to Susie Fritz. We are having a little bit of connection trouble right now, but we're gonna get back to it. She's talking to us about the concept of reading and how important it is. She has her specific ways of doing so. She has a gold medal square background, but she has been more than 19 years coaching in Kansas State University, one of the best coaches in the nation. I'm sorry, connection is failing us today, Susie.
I'm sorry.
Now, hey, Susie, so you were talking about then that just trying to simplify this concept of perception, the concept of reading throughout the game. I wanna go to this last technical subject more than anything, and then I want to ask you a coaching question. But in terms of your huddles, how do they look like? How do you prioritize what's important?
I'm assuming you're talking about in matches?
Like timeout, like defensive timeout, and then an offensive timeout.
Yeah, so I think those are two very different things, right? Because usually if you're calling a defensive timeout, usually things are going well. I mean, usually defensive timeouts are not timeouts that you've called, period, right? It's because you've got somebody stuck and you're running points. And so the vibe in a defensive timeout is much different than the vibe in an offensive timeout when you've given up 3-4 straight points and you can't get out of it, right? So I think those are two very different things. usually, again, just going back to, I think it's important to let the players take some responsibility for the timeout. I think you've got to give them some I think the initial part of a timeout is about kind of a decompress. I don't think you want to go into the huddle right away and just start throwing out information. The first 30 seconds are about water, breathe in and out, you know, chill, right? Just take a few minutes to just regroup, get your thoughts together. And then I think the back part of a timeout is about the most important things, you know, is if it's a defensive timeout, then you're talking about percentages and probabilities of what's likely coming, you know. Now don't get locked into it, but remember in rotation 2, they like number 3 on the right. Let's go get her line seam, you know. Hey, let's serve it in this gap between in the 1-6 seam, you know, let's see if we can drop it on him here, or let's make the middle handle it, or whatever that might be. Offensive timeouts are usually, you need to kind of split personnel just a little bit more in offensive timeouts. So we like to maybe talk, give them that 30 seconds, you know, hey, let's go hut 2 red coming out of the timeout. And then usually we like to pull the setter aside and go, so-and-so's hot, go to this person if you can. Depending on your setter, you have to be careful. You have to be careful with them, because if you say, hey, we need to set right side, and then the pass gets pulled clear over into left front and they try something
do it
nuts,
no matter what. Yes.
They'll do it. Yeah, and everybody has those, right? So you have to be a little bit careful and know your setter. But oftentimes I usually try to give them option 1, option 2 coming out of a timeout, you know, if we can. So, and a lot of times in offensive timeouts, I find myself trying to settle the passers down, because usually, you know, 50 to 80% of the time it's because you're not handling it, you know.
Susie, what now? You know, you have been coaching so much in Kansas State. You're coming back, you know, after this pandemic, so many unknowns. What do you know that you want to do with your team moving forward? And what have you learned from yourself throughout this crisis?
Oh, man. Without sounding insensitive to the coronavirus, right? And the impact that it has had on just, you know, people, right? I think what the time has given me is almost like a rejuvenated sense of, like, I miss it, you know, I miss it. And I think that in coaching, there's very few times when you get like these breaks, that almost like a sabbatical of sorts, to be able to reevaluate your life without getting too philosophical, you know. I mean, what are the most important things in your life, right? What are the most important things? And I think just self-discovery for me, being a volleyball coach and coaching my team at Kansas State and being the best possible coach for them, is one of my most important things, you know, outside of being good to my family. I'm tired of doing yard work. You know, this is as good as my lawn is ever going to look. So I think that's the big thing. You know, it's just given me a chance to almost regroup, you know. And so what now is you know, it feels new. It feels new, right? And I mean, you're in a situation where you've only gotten to coach your team for 1 month. 1 month.
No, I agree.
So you have to be thinking like there's so many things to do, you know.
Yeah, we're just getting started, and but I think that you're so right about, as long as people have stayed healthy and safe throughout this crisis, it has been an opportunity as well to get better, you know, to reflect on the good and bad things, and then allow also for some air to be coming out of, like, you know, we live a life of always looking forward, you know, what's next, how do we get better? But we don't ever have the time to actually do so. So I think I agree. I think that it has provided that. So many unknowns, of course, so many people suffering out there. But if people are staying safe and healthy, it has also provided such an avenue for it.
Yeah. And I just want to say again, like, you've probably done more than anybody in terms of your own personal professional growth, right? And what you're doing, not just for yourself, but for like the volleyball community. I just think it's amazing. And I'm really, I don't know, I'm proud of you, for lack of sounding condescending,
Thank
because
you.
I remember when you were just getting started. I remember, and now you're big time, and you're doing all these things with all these great people. And it's really, really cool stuff. So nice job.
Susie, thanks so much for always supporting me, for always being a great part of my journey. I'm very grateful for you not just being a good friend, but being an example of, if you want to be a great learner, you have to be humble, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be someone that could stay hungry, and also someone that would be great with relationship skills. You're someone so relatable, and someone that has always been able and willing to help others. So through this platform, I just want to thank you officially. I wish you the best moving forward with Kansas State. I hope that your players and their families come back better than ever, healthy and safe, and that we can all have another season.
Thank you. You too. I'm rooting for you, and I hope you guys get that thing rolling quick.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And for the people watching us out there, I want to say that tomorrow we're going to have someone that is considered one of the best coaches in the history of our game, Mr. Bernardo Resende, Bernardinho. So, and it's going to be in English for the ones that are watching out there. So I encourage everyone to tune in tomorrow. Sunday, we're going to have one of Susie's biggest mentors, Jim McLaughlin. So it's going to be a great weekend. And then on Monday, we come back and we're going to have Mr. Shondell as well. So looking forward to these learning opportunities. It was great today as well. Please go and like and follow our page, Volley Junkies, on Facebook. And I'll see you guys very soon.